Welcome to the GCN Tech Clinic, where we aim to answer your bike and tech related questions. As ever, you can submit your questions using the hashtag AskGCNTech down in the comments below and on other videos as well. So without further ado, let's get into this week's first question, which comes from Harry Luck. It's a seasonal question, this. He says, my wife is not a cyclist. What should I get her for Christmas? Hashtag AskGCNTech. Well, obviously a bike, so that she can become a cyclist. But I mean, if you don't want to stretch your whole budget towards a bike, then perhaps consider getting a GCN race pass, as that way she'll be able to watch cycling and then get into it. Trust me, she'll absolutely love watching the Tour de France. Definitely get her that. Don't get her chocolates. Although if you do get her some chocolates, you can eat them too. Basically, my advice would be get her a present that you yourself can also use and enjoy. Anyway, JC says, I recently bought a new BMC team machine. It came with a 3450 compact chain set. Is this standard? I like it for the hills, but I don't like it for the flat or down hills. What should I do to get the best of both? Well, a 3450 is not a standard chain set. That's what's known as a compact chain set. A standard chain set, which was kind of a lot more common back in the day and is still what the pros tend to use, is a 5339. But for most amateur cyclists, this is a bit too tough on the hills, and they prefer that compact. And that's why bike brands ship most bikes with a 5034. The halfway house between this is a mid-compact, which is a 5236. Now, you could switch out to that or go the whole hog and get the standard chain set. But yeah, factor in what you're going to be able to do on the hills. So what I actually like to do is to use a 5339 most of the time, but then pair that with a bigger cassette on the back. And because of more modern derailleurs now accommodate bigger cassettes, you can put an 1132 on the rear, and therefore you still have that big spread of gears and the easier 32 cog for the hills, and I find that that works pretty well most of the time. So I'd investigate that. There's also gear calculators online that you can, if you Google gear calculators, you'll be able to find them, and it'll be able to tell you how different gear ratios compare, so that you should be able to work out if you're going to be struggling on the hills and if you're going to be fine on the flat. So yeah, check that out, but there's plenty of good options out there. Next question is from Heinrich Le Breton, who says, long time watcher, first time asker. Nice. I've recently installed an 1134 tooth cassette, which of course meant installing a medium cage derailleur and a new chain as well. While I'm pretty sure I've done all of this correctly with the help of GCN Tech content, the chain is rubbing and skipping on the next cog up when it's in the smallest cog at the back, and he's backpedaling as well. It's skipping when he's backpedaling. It doesn't seem to have any issues when pedaling normally though. Is this something for concern? Do I need to adjust it, or is it fairly common with larger cassettes and derailleurs? TIA, which either stands for thanks in advance or this is Africa. Well, Heinrich, based on your question, it sounds like the issue might be that you're cross-chaining by being in the smaller sprocket on the chain set and then the smallest sprocket on the cassette. This causes the chain, rather than to be in a nice straight line, the chain is coming in at an angle. This is known as cross-chaining. It's not efficient for your drivetrain. It creates extra friction, which is costing you precious watts as you pedal along, and is also likely to cause that chain to rub slightly, which means that when you back pedal, it can sort of skip a little bit. Now the solution is really simple. Just don't cross-chain. Make sure you change the gear at the front in the chain set, and then that should solve the problem. Next question is from Binny Armin, who says, I have a fairly slim saddle, and after some time in it, I feel like I have to use the washroom, I think he means the bathroom, when he really doesn't. Is there a reason why? Well, I'm not a urologist, but based on our videos on sort of sexual health and things that we've done in the past, you just check out size videos on them, they're really good. The general advice from those experts is that if you do feel like consistent discomfort while riding on a saddle, it's probably not the right saddle for you. While a bike saddle should never be an armchair, it shouldn't cause discomfort. And by the sounds of it, that's what it's doing in this case. So it's probably worth you trying out a few different saddles and finding one that better suits you. I would say it's not normal to constantly feel like you need the toilet while cycling. Although another thing that can cause that can be shorts as well. Like if your shorts aren't quite right, if they're really, really tight, they can put a bit of pressure on your bladder in my experience and make you need the toilet more. But there are loads of great saddle options at bike shops and saddle fitting services now. You know, well, things like the Selle Italia ID Match that we checked out recently in Italy was a really great tool, but there are other ones as well. And you know, maybe something like a saddle with a cutout might help you. But saddle comfort is incredibly personal, and you know, one man's armchair is can be like a medieval torture device to another person. So definitely go check some things out and see how you get on, but don't ignore it. Next question is from Peter Headley, who says he's replaced a bent derailleur hanger on his bike. If you're not familiar, that's the little piece of alloy that holds the rear derailleur to the back of the bike frame. And he says now he's replaced it, he cannot shift into his lowest gear, no matter how much he adjusts the low limit screw. Does he need to adjust the B limit screw, because that seems to be seized? Any suggestions on how to loosen it? Right, whenever you have a drivetrain problem with your gears like this, and this applies not just to Peter, but to all of you, is I would just completely set up the whole system from scratch. That way you eliminate anything that could be causing a problem. So imagine you're just, you know, building your bike up. So, you know, loosen the cable pinch bolt so that the cable's not under tension on the rear derailleur, and follow the steps that we've outlined in our how to set up a rear derailleur video. So then set the limit screws at either end of the derailleur, and then start adjusting the cable tension. As you're setting the indexing, it's probably worth to check the status of the cable that you've got in there, and it might need replacing. You know, it might have got frayed or something like that. And to be honest, it's probably worth just changing and putting a fresh new one in, as it'll just make sure you get good crisp shifting. And once you've set the limits and the indexing and the cable tension, you then move on to the B limit screw, which adjusts the position of the top jockey wheel relative to the cassette. Now, if your B limit screw is seized, like you say it is, you can try and loosen it off with some penetrating spray. Something like Muc-Off's MO94 works brilliantly for this. But if it's still seized, then perhaps, you know, remove the rear derailleur off completely, and then just soak it in some penetrating spray to try and, you know, get extra penetration and try and release that screw. And then hopefully it will be okay after you've done that. The last question this week is from Noah Pastor, and it's a lube question. Noah is asking, do you need to apply chain lube on every single ride? Right, absolutely not. You shouldn't. This question is a sort of how long is a piece of string kind of question though, because the frequency with which you have to apply lube to your bike depends on where you're riding. So if you're riding in very wet conditions, lube is getting washed off. Your bike is also getting dirtier probably as well. Whereas if you're riding in pristine, you know, dry, sunny places with clean roads, the amount of time you'll have to clean your bike is also dramatically reduced. Now, if you use a dry lube in wet conditions, it will wash off very quickly, meaning you will have to replace that lube. And so the key take-home message is that when your chain becomes dry, you need to apply lube to it. So how do you know if your chain's dry? You can hear it. A nice well-lubed chain is very quiet and very smooth, but as soon as you start to be able to hear those sort of, you know, squeaky noises coming from your drivetrain, you know that there's lube required on there. So make sure you lube your chain when it needs it, but don't lube it too often, because if you lube it, you know, loads and put excess lube on there, it builds up, and then that attracts dirt and it creates this black grinding paste which wears away at your components and accelerates how quickly they'll wear out. So definitely don't do that. I hope it's answered your question, and it's always a pleasure answering you guys' questions, so please keep them coming in. And sorry if I haven't got round to your question this week, but just keep firing them down in the comments below, and hopefully we'll get to it. And I'll see you in the next one. Also, check out the GCN shop. We've got some good bargains in there, especially for some last minute Christmas gifts, if that's what you're looking for.